Days you imagined, the holidays, the quiet evenings, the adventures. It's losing an entire possible version of your life. And if you don't take the time to grieve that honestly and fully, you end up dragging that dead future around with you like a ghost. Grief is not a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that you dared to love, that you dared to hope, that you dared to believe in something beyond yourself. And yes, it hurts like hell to watch those dreams crumble. It cuts deep into the part of you that still wants to believe in happy endings. But here's the thing. Grieving the loss of that imagined future is the gateway to creating a new one. If you don't mourn it, you stay stuck at the gates, peering backward, unable to cross into what comes next. Mourning clears the rubble. It clears the space inside you, where new dreams can grow, where new possibilities can take root. You cannot plant a new garden in a foundation you refuse to clear. You cannot plant a new garden in soil choked with weeds. You must be willing to feel the pain without running from it, without numbing it, without pretending it isn't there. You have to sit with it, as unbearable as it feels, and let it wash over you. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to face it. Strong enough to understand that pain, when faced head on, transforms. It burns away the illusions, the false hopes, the lies you told yourself to survive. And when it's done burning, what remains is real, solid, true. That's the only ground worth standing on. That's the only life worth living, one built not on fantasy or denial, but on a foundation of truth, however hard one it may be. You are not just mourning what you lost. You are mourning who you thought you had to be to earn it. And in that grief, you are giving birth to someone new, someone wiser, someone stronger, someone who will never again mistake being needed for being loved. The story you tell yourself about what happened matters far more than the event itself. People think it's the facts that ruin them, that the betrayal, the abandonment, the cruelty itself is what leaves them broken. But that's not true. It's the interpretation, it's the meaning you give it. You could choose to tell yourself that you were a fool, that you deserved it, that you're cursed to repeat the same pattern forever. And if you tell yourself that long enough, it will become true. Not because it's inherently true, but because belief shapes reality in ways you can't even see until you're drowning in it. You become what you repeat. If you allow yourself to be the victim in your own story, if you crown yourself the tragic character who has done wrong and who will never recover, you will live out that tragedy over and over again until it becomes your identity. You will start to seek out new betrayals because they will feel familiar. They will fit the narrative you've accepted. You will find yourself drawn to chaos, mistaking it for passion, mistaking it for love, mistaking it for life itself, because part of you will believe that peace and stability were never meant for someone like you. You have to take control of the story. You have to pick up the pen and start writing something different. You have to refuse to see yourself as the one who was destroyed and start seeing yourself as the one who survived, the one who endured, the one who, despite every reason to give up, chose instead to stand. It's a brutal thing to do, to reframe your own suffering. It feels like betrayal at first, like you're letting the person who hurt you off the hook. But that's not what you're doing. You're letting yourself off the hook. You're freeing yourself from the chains of a narrative that keeps you small, keeps you angry, keeps you broken. It requires brutal honesty. You have to look at the role you played not to blame yourself, but to claim your power. You have to say, this is what I allowed. This is what I ignored. This is what I tolerated because I was afraid of what it would mean to walk away. And then you have to forgive yourself for not knowing what you know now. You have to forgive yourself for wanting to be loved so badly that you accepted less than you deserved. That's part of rewriting the story too, not just reframing the other person's actions, but reframing your own, seeing yourself not as weak, but as human, as someone who tried, as someone who hoped, and then deciding that going forward, you will hope for more, expect more, demand more, not from others, but from yourself. Because once you rewrite the story, you realize something else. You realize that your identity, your true identity, is not forged in the furnace of another person's validation. It's not something they can give or take away. It's something you build piece by piece through the choices you make every day. And that realization changes everything. It forces you to ask a deeper question. Who am I now that I am no longer defined by what was done to me? And the terrifying, beautiful answer is you can be anyone you choose to be. But you have to build that person consciously, intentionally, carefully. You have to stop letting your wounds dictate your future. You have to stop worshiping at the altar of what was lost and start investing in what could be gained. It's not enough to simply survive your heartbreak. You have to transcend it. You have to become someone who is no longer chained to that old pain. And you do that by pouring yourself into new pursuits, new passions, new dreams. You rebuild your identity by creating a life so full, so rich, so vibrant, that the echoes of the past fade into insignificance. Not because you've erased the past, you never will, but because it no longer defines the boundaries of your world. It becomes a small chapter in a much larger story, one that's filled with meaning and purpose and growth. It requires discipline. It requires waking up every morning and choosing again and again to live in the present instead of the past. It means refusing to let bitterness take root in your heart, even when it would feel righteous. It means nurturing the parts of you that bring life instead of death. Your curiosity, your kindness, your courage. And yes, it means facing the terrifying truth that building a new identity is hard work. It means accepting that you will stumble, that you will have days where you feel like you're still trapped in the old pain, where you wonder if you've made any progress at all. But every time you choose to stand back up, every time you choose to create instead of destroy, every time you choose to build instead of tear down, you are proving in action that you are no longer a prisoner of what happened to you. You are free. Not because someone set you free, but because you chose to free yourself. There's a mistake that people often make after they've been hurt, and it's a deadly one. They close themselves off. They build walls around their heart so thick, so high, that nothing can get in. Not love, not friendship, not even hope. They tell themselves it's protection, but it's not. It's a prison. Pain convinces you that vulnerability is weakness, that if you care again, if you open yourself again, you'll just be hurt again. And so, slowly, quietly, you begin to withdraw. You stop trusting. You stop reaching out. You stop believing in the possibility of anything better. You think you're keeping yourself safe, but what you're really doing is sentencing yourself to a life of loneliness and isolation. And loneliness, real, deep, existential loneliness, is far more destructive than heartbreak ever was. The only way forward is terrifying, and it's this: you have to risk being hurt again. You have to voluntarily walk back into the possibility of pain, not recklessly, not blindly, but with courage, with open eyes. You have to understand that every meaningful connection in your life will carry the risk of suffering. Love will always make you vulnerable. Trust will always carry the possibility of betrayal. There's no way around it. But the alternative, a life without love, without trust, without connection, is a slow death. It's a life of quiet desperation, of bitterness, of cynicism, so deep that it poisons every interaction, every potential joy. You cannot let the person who hurt you win by closing your heart forever. You cannot let the worst moment of your past dictate the entire future of your soul. You have to choose deliberately, painfully, to keep your heart open, to love again, to trust again. Not because the world deserves your trust, not because everyone you meet will be worthy of your love, but because you are not willing to become a lesser version of yourself, because you refuse to let fear shape the person you are becoming. And this means setting standards. It means learning from the past, not becoming jaded, but becoming wise. It means recognizing the red flags you once ignored. It means understanding the difference between healthy risk and blind naivety. You're not called to be foolish. You're called to be courageous, to step into connection with discernment, with boundaries, but also with hope. That's the balance you must strike if you want to live a life worth living, to open your heart to the world, knowing it may hurt you, but choosing to do it anyway, because the alternative, isolation, bitterness, despair, it's so much worse. And finally, there's the question of forgiveness. People misunderstand forgiveness. They think it means excusing what was done, pretending it didn't matter, letting the other person back into their life. But that's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is not about them at all. Forgiveness is about you. It's about refusing to carry their sin, their mistake, their betrayal on your back for the rest of your life. It's about putting down the burden of resentment before it crushes you. Resentment is a slow-acting poison. It corrodes your soul from the inside out. At first, it feels justified, even righteous. How dare they? How could they? But over time, it hardens your heart. It makes you small. It ties you in chains to the very person you want so desperately to forget. As long as you hold on to that anger, that bitterness, you are still giving them power over you. You are letting their actions define not only your past, but your present and your future. You are choosing to stay in the prison they built. Forgiveness is the key that unlocks that prison door. It is the decision to say, I will not let your actions dictate the rest of my life. I will not allow what you did to me to shape the kind of person I become. I refuse to carry this hatred any longer because it is killing me, not you. Forgiveness doesn't mean trusting them again. It doesn't mean welcoming them back into your life. It means releasing the emotional debt you believe they owe you. It means accepting that there may never be justice in the way you want it, that there may never be an apology or an explanation or a moment where they finally understand what they did. It means making peace with the reality that your healing cannot depend on their remorse. Forgiveness is radical responsibility. It is choosing your freedom over your fury. It is a profound act of strength, not weakness, to look at someone who wronged you and to say, you will not have the final word over my life. I will. It's not something you do once and it's over. It's a process, a discipline. Sometimes you have to forgive the same person 100 times in a day. Sometimes you have to forgive yourself too for staying too long, for believing too much, for hoping against hope that things would change. But every time you choose forgiveness, you are reclaiming a piece of your soul. You are moving one step closer to becoming whole again. You are writing a new story, not one defined by betrayal and heartbreak, but one defined by resilience, by grace, by strength that suffering could not destroy. You are not here by accident. There's a part of you strong, brave, unstoppable, that is ready to live unchained from the pain that someone else left behind. Today, make yourself a promise. I deserve joy. I deserve freedom. I deserve peace. And you do. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to let go of someone who hurt you? What helped you move forward? Share your story in the comments. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this message touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need it. And tell me, what other topics would you like to explore together? Let's keep building this community of growth, strength, and transformation. Your healing journey starts now. Decode relationships, transform connections. Welcome to Beyond Boundaries. Have you ever felt like the world was trying to make you forget just how powerful you truly are? Like somewhere between the expectations, the sacrifices, and the seasons of life, a part of you started whispering instead of roaring. Today, I'm here to help you reignite that flame. Because true, timeless, feminine power isn't about becoming something new. It's about returning to who you were always meant to be. And once you reconnect with that inner strength, relationships, confidence, and peace flow effortlessly. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share could be the moment everything begins to shift for you. Let's dive into the 9 keys to inner strength and timeless feminine power. The first step toward rediscovering your inner strength is recognizing that boundaries are not selfish. They are vital. Too often, people confuse kindness with compliance and compassion with self-erasure. But a life without clear, carefully defended boundaries is not an act of virtue. It's an act of slow disintegration. You are not obligated to exhaust yourself to make others comfortable. In fact, every time you abandon your own needs to accommodate the unreasonable demands of others, you teach them and you teach yourself that your existence is secondary, that your voice is dispensable, that your time and energy are resources for others to plunder at will. Setting a boundary is an act of profound moral courage. It says, I recognize the value of my life. I recognize the sacredness of my time and my emotional energy. I am not infinite. I am not a machine. It requires self-respect. But more than that, it demands a fundamental acceptance of the tragic truth. You cannot save anyone by destroying yourself. You cannot create healthy relationships from a place of silent resentment. If you allow yourself to be mistreated, dismissed, or neglected, you become complicit in your own diminishment. You must understand that every boundary you fail to establish is a debt you will eventually be forced to pay with interest. Resentment builds. Fatigue deepens. The unspoken burden of carrying others' expectations will one day break you, not because you're weak, but because you are human. It is far better then to suffer the short-term discomfort of saying no than to endure the long-term devastation of living a life that doesn't belong to you. A well-articulated boundary is not a declaration of war, it is a declaration of peace. A way of bringing honesty into your relationships, giving others the chance to truly see you, to meet you as you are, rather than as a hollow, ever-accommodating shadow of yourself. It gives the people around you the opportunity to rise to the challenge of respecting you, and if they cannot, it grants you the clarity you need to walk away with dignity. This is not cruelty. It is a necessary act of survival, and more importantly, it is an act of honor. What's remarkable and deeply redemptive is that when you start setting boundaries, you discover something almost miraculous. The right people will not only respect them, they will appreciate them. They will feel safer around you because you are trustworthy. You are not building relationships based on manipulation or silent martyrdom. You are building relationships based on truth, strength, and mutual respect. When you stand firm in your boundaries, you transform not only your relationships, but yourself. You become a woman who knows the cost of her soul and refuses to sell it cheaply. You become someone who can be trusted, even by yourself. You become a lighthouse, not chasing ships, not rescuing drowning sailors, but standing tall, shining clearly, offering safe harbor without sacrificing your own foundation. And from that place of strength, love can truly flourish, not because you have made yourself small for it, but because you have become large enough to contain it without losing yourself. The second key to reclaiming your timeless power lies in the almost forgotten art of stillness. In a world that moves at the speed of anxiety, stillness can feel foreign, even dangerous. But it is precisely because of this that it is so profoundly transformative. Stillness is where truth lives. When you are perpetually moving, endlessly distracting yourself, you lose access to the voice inside that knows what you truly want, who you truly are, and what you must do. There is a kind of courage required to be still, to sit with your own thoughts, your own regrets, your own longings, without flinching, without fleeing. It is a discipline, and it is painful. It is far easier to be busy than to be honest. But if you avoid that confrontation, you sacrifice your own becoming, you drift from yourself, and life in all its complexity and potential passes you by unnoticed. Stillness is not the absence of action. It is the preparation for right action. It is where you cultivate the inner order necessary to withstand the outer chaos. A woman who can be still in the face of uncertainty, who can delay her reaction long enough to listen to deeper wisdom, becomes dangerous in the best possible way. She cannot be easily manipulated. She cannot be easily panicked. She moves from a place of groundedness, not reactivity. When you allow yourself to be still, you create the space for your mind to sort itself out. Problems that once seemed insurmountable begin to untangle. Patterns that you were blind to become clear. You are no longer lurching from crisis to crisis. You are responding to life with measured intention. And with every moment of stillness, you train your nervous system to tolerate complexity, to embrace the unknown without succumbing to terror. Stillness, paradoxically, is what enables growth. Without it, you are simply reacting to the surface of life, caught in endless cycles of reactivity and regret. With it, you gain the ability to act in accordance with your highest values, to resist the fleeting temptations that would otherwise derail you, to see clearly what needs to be done and to summon the strength to do it. You do not become powerful by chasing noise. You become powerful by mastering silence. You learn to recognize which fears are lies, which cravings are distractions, and which dreams are worth suffering for. In stillness, you are reborn, again and again, not as someone new, but as someone truer, more aligned with the deepest currents of life. And it is there, in that quiet, often painful space, that the roots of genuine feminine strength grow deep, so deep that no storm, no betrayal, no loss can uproot them. There, in the stillness, you discover that you were never fragile after all. You were simply waiting for yourself. There is a terrible cost to silence when truth demands to be spoken. Every time you swallow the words that should have been said, you build a prison around your soul, and you may tell yourself it's kindness or wisdom or prudence, but deep down you know it's fear. It's the fear of being rejected, of upsetting the balance, of becoming inconvenient to the people around you. But truth is not a weapon to be sheathed out of politeness. Truth is a responsibility, first to yourself and then to the world. Without truth, there can be no love. Without truth, there can be no trust. To speak honestly, especially when your voice trembles, is to affirm your own existence. It is to stand before the unknown and say, I will not lie to protect my comfort. I will not betray what is real within me for the sake of fitting in. It's a terrifying act, because speaking the truth destabilizes the fragile agreements we make to keep relationships superficially intact. But those agreements are not relationships. They are negotiations between masks. You will suffer when you speak the truth. Make no mistake about that. You will lose people who preferred your silence. You will watch structures you depended on crack and crumble. But the suffering of living a lie is far greater and infinitely more corrosive. Because it is the kind of suffering that hollows you out from within, slowly, invisibly, until you no longer recognize your own reflection. It is a profound moral obligation to say what you mean and to mean what you say. It is through honest speech that you clarify your own thoughts, sharpen your own character, and offer the people around you the chance to truly see you. Not the version of you designed to avoid conflict, but the version of you that can stand upright in the storm of life. Courageous speech transforms relationships. It filters out those who cannot or will not accept your authenticity, and it draws toward you those who are willing to meet you on the solid ground of reality. Every honest conversation, even the painful ones, builds intimacy. Every moment you dare to say, this is what I believe, this is what I feel, this is where I stand, you declare that you are a force to be reckoned with. Not a victim of circumstance, but an active participant in the shaping of your own destiny. And sometimes the truth you must speak is directed inward. You must have the courage to admit to yourself when you are bitter, when you are envious, when you are cowardly. Without self-honesty, you become your own greatest deceiver. But with it, you give yourself a fighting chance at redemption, at transformation, at becoming someone you can genuinely respect. Speaking the truth, even in a trembling voice, is not simply a moral act. It is a salvific one. It saves your relationships, it saves your integrity, and ultimately it saves your life. There is a tragedy in the way people deny their own journey. They look at others and imagine that life should have unfolded differently for them, that somehow their path has been a mistake, a deviation from some perfect, imagined life. But comparison is a form of violence against yourself. It takes the unique, unrepeatable narrative of your existence and tries to force it into someone else's mold. And in doing so, it breeds resentment, self-loathing, and despair. You must cultivate a profound respect for your own journey, not because it is perfect, but because it is yours. Every moment of joy, every betrayal, every failure and triumph, every scar on your heart has shaped you into a being of incalculable depth. To despise your own story is to despise the very soil in which your soul has grown. It is to reject the hand you were dealt, not realizing that greatness comes not from having a perfect hand, but from playing a flawed one with courage and wisdom. Life is fundamentally tragic. There will be suffering, there will be loss, but there will also be meaning if you are willing to look for it and to participate in it. When you stop measuring yourself against the illusory standards set by the images you see around you, you begin to see the truth. Your life has been a training ground for your highest potential. Your heartbreaks taught you compassion. Your struggles taught you resilience. Your failures taught you humility. Your perseverance taught you strength. You do not become powerful by having a pristine record. You become powerful by standing up again and again, bloodied but unbowed, refusing to let the weight of your past crush your spirit. The journey you have walked, with all its imperfections, has prepared you for a purpose that no one else can fulfill, but you must claim it. You must choose to see yourself not as a victim of fate, but as the protagonist of a story still unfolding. Gratitude for your own journey is not passive acceptance. It is an active, radical stance against the forces that would diminish you. It is the recognition that, against all odds, you are still here. You are still fighting. You are still capable of love, of joy, of creation. And that is no small thing. That is a miracle. When you learn to honor your own journey, you become immune to the poison of envy and bitterness. You stop asking, why me? And you start asking, what now? You stop seeing your past as a series of wounds, and you start seeing it as the forge in which your character was tempered. And from that place of fierce gratitude, you move forward, not in shame, not in regret, but in power. Strength is not found in suppressing your emotions or pretending they don't exist. Real strength comes from allowing yourself to feel everything fully. Grief, rage, love, fear, and yet not being ruled by any of it. Emotional mastery is not a denial of your humanity. It is the integration of it. Without mastery, your emotions own you. They hijack your judgment, distort your perceptions, and chain you to cycles of reactivity that sabotage your potential for peace, for love, for greatness. To master your emotions is to first recognize that they are real, but not always truthful. Your feelings are indicators, not dictators. They carry valuable information, yes, but they are not infallible guides. Anger tells you a boundary has been crossed. Fear warns you of danger. Sadness signals loss. But these messages require interpretation, not blind obedience. A mature spirit knows how to hear the emotional signal without becoming enslaved to it. It is not strength to collapse into fury at every insult or to descend into despair at every setback. That is weakness masquerading as passion. True passion is tempered by discipline. You must become the kind of person who can sit quietly in the fire of your own emotions without flailing, without lashing out, without retreating into numbness. You must be able to say, I am furious, and yet I will act with wisdom. I am terrified, and yet I will move forward with courage. I am heartbroken, and yet I will remain open to love. This is not repression. This is transcendence. It is the conscious choice to honor your feelings without letting them derail your values or your purpose. This path is not easy. Emotional mastery demands vigilance. It demands that you interrogate your impulses, challenge your assumptions, and constantly strive for greater self-awareness. It demands that you tell yourself the truth about what you are feeling and why. Is this sorrow truly about the present moment, or is it an echo of old wounds? Is this anger righteous, or is it the bitterness of unmet expectations and bruised pride? Only by asking the hard questions can you prevent your emotions from becoming weapons turned against your own well-being. And make no mistake, if you do not master your emotions, someone else will. There are entire industries, entire systems of power that prey on those who live at the mercy of their feelings. They manipulate your outrage, your fear, your longing, and they profit from your instability. To master your emotions is therefore an act of rebellion. It is a refusal to be controlled, a refusal to be reduced to a predictable puppet of your impulses. It is the reclaiming of your sovereignty. You owe it to yourself and to those who depend on you to become a pillar of emotional strength, not because you will never be shaken, but because when the storms of life come, you will not be uprooted by every gust of wind. You will feel the pain, the fear, the temptation, but you will not be defeated by them. You will move forward, clear-eyed and determined, because your emotions will serve your values, not the other way around. Grace is perhaps the most misunderstood virtue of all. It is often mistaken for weakness, for passivity, for the simple avoidance of conflict. But grace in its truest form is nothing less than strength under perfect control. Grace is the ability to endure offense without losing your composure. It is the discipline to respond rather than react. It is the supreme act of rising above the immediate insult, the immediate fear, the immediate temptation to strike back with cruelty or despair. To carry yourself with grace is to be a warrior of the highest order, because it requires the taming of your most primal instincts. It is easy to lash out. It is easy to descend into bitterness, sarcasm, cynicism, but grace demands that you rise again and again into a higher mode of being. It demands that you treat others not merely as they deserve in their worst moments, but as they could be at their best. It demands that you refuse to allow others' chaos to infect your own spirit. Grace does not mean tolerating abuse. It does not mean erasing your own needs or excusing cruelty. Grace is not the abandonment of justice. It is the refinement of it. It is the commitment to act with dignity, even when dignity is not returned to you. It is the ability to protect your soul from the corrosive effects of resentment, even when you are deeply wounded. It is the daily choice to be better, not because others deserve it, but because you refuse to become less than you are capable of being. When you lead with grace, you alter the dynamic of every relationship you touch. You become a force that others cannot easily provoke, manipulate, or diminish. You command respect, not through intimidation, but through the undeniable presence of someone who knows her own worth and will not stoop to the level of those who have forgotten theirs. You become a mirror in which others are confronted with their own pettiness, their own rage, their own brokenness. And some, seeing themselves reflected in that light, will rise to meet you there. Grace is not naivety. It is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is the product of pain faced head on, of fear endured, of lessons learned in the crucible of suffering. It is what allows you to forgive without forgetting, to love without losing yourself, to hope without being destroyed by disappointment. When you choose grace, you are not surrendering. You are asserting the deepest form of power available to any human being, the power to define yourself, regardless of circumstance. The world will offer you endless opportunities to become bitter, angry, vengeful, broken. Grace is the daily radical choice to refuse. It is the decision to stand tall, to speak truth, to move forward with open hands and an unbroken heart, not because it is easy, but because it is right. There is a vital distinction between giving love and surrendering your soul in the desperate hope that it will be returned. Love, when it is authentic, does not require you to abandon yourself. It does not demand that you sacrifice your integrity, your dreams, or your dignity in exchange for affection or acceptance. Yet far too often people confuse love with self-erasure. They think that if they just give enough, bend enough, forgive enough, they will finally earn the love they crave. But love that must be purchased at the price of your soul is not love at all. It is bondage. You must understand that you are not meant to dissolve into another person. You are not a fragment waiting to be completed by someone else's approval. You are a whole being, and your wholeness is the foundation from which true love can be given and received. When you forget this, when you allow your self-respect to erode in the name of love, you don't just betray yourself, you betray the relationship as well, because you teach the other person that you are willing to be treated as less than you are. And you teach yourself that your worth is conditional, fragile, dependent on external validation. Authentic love requires two strong, sovereign souls standing side by side, not one consuming the other, not one diminishing to make space for the other. It requires boundaries, honesty, and above all, self-respect. When you love from a place of strength, your love becomes a gift, not a transaction. You give freely, not because you are desperate for reciprocation, but because your own fullness overflows. You can forgive without being a fool. You can be vulnerable without being a victim. You can commit without losing yourself. And make no mistake, this is terrifying. To stand firmly in your own worth means risking loneliness. It means walking away from those who would rather have a compliant shell than a living, breathing partner. It means facing the possibility that some will reject the real you, not because you are unworthy, but because they are unprepared to meet you on equal ground. But the alternative, a life of quiet despair, of aching resentment, of invisible chains, is a far greater cost. You are not here to be loved at any price. You are here to be loved rightly, truly, deeply. And that begins with loving yourself enough to refuse anything less. Love without self-respect is a slow death of the spirit. But love grounded in self-respect is a force that elevates everyone it touches. It inspires growth. It demands honesty. It creates a bond that is not dependent on perpetual sacrifice, but on mutual reverence. That is the kind of love worth fighting for. That is the kind of love worth waiting for. That is the kind of love you deserve. But only if you are willing to first give it to yourself. Resilience is often spoken of as if it were a simple toughness, a brute refusal to break under pressure. But true resilience is far more nuanced. It is not the absence of suffering. It is the deep, almost sacred commitment to rise again and again, no matter how many times life tries to bury you. It is the refusal to let defeat have the final word. It is the steady, often invisible labor of rebuilding yourself after every fall. Every scar you carry, physical, emotional, spiritual, is a testament to battles fought and lessons learned. They are not signs of weakness, they are marks of honor. They are the proof that you did not surrender, even when surrender would have been easier. To be resilient is not to be untouched by pain. It is to be transformed by it in a way that deepens your character rather than shattering it. Resilience demands that you cultivate a relationship with suffering that is neither masochistic nor avoidant. You do not seek out pain, but you do not flee from it either. You understand that life will wound you, and you choose to meet that reality with open eyes and an open heart. You choose to believe that every hardship can teach you something essential, something that cannot be learned in any other way. Resilience is forged in the small daily decisions to keep going, to get up when you want to stay down, to speak when silence would be easier, to hope when despair whispers seductively that nothing will ever change. It is not one grand act of heroism, but 1,000 tiny acts of defiance against the forces that seek to crush your spirit. And sometimes resilience looks like letting go, not of your dreams or your standards, but of your illusion. Letting go of the fantasy that life will be fair, that justice will be immediate, that love will always be reciprocated. It is the mature, courageous acceptance that life is not obligated to grant you what you desire, and that your worth is not dependent on whether it does. You are stronger than you know, stronger not because you have never been broken, but because you have chosen again and again to rebuild from the ruins. Stronger, not because you have never known despair, but because you have refused to let it claim you permanently. The future belongs to those who can suffer without becoming bitter, who can fail without losing their passion, who can be betrayed without giving up on trust itself. The future belongs to those who know that resilience is not about being invincible, but about being relentless. It is about the sacred, stubborn belief that life, even at its harshest, is still worth engaging with. It is about planting your feet firmly on the earth, lifting your gaze to the horizon, and saying, "I will not be conquered." So, which of these keys spoke to you the loudest today? Which one felt like a mirror held up to your spirit? I would love to hear your thoughts. Dive into the comments and share your reflections. If this message stirred something inside you, give this video a like, share it with a friend who needs a reminder of her strength. And don't forget to subscribe so we can keep growing together. And if there's a topic you're craving to explore next, relationships, self-worth, emotional healing, let me know. This isn't just a channel, it's a community where your voice matters. Your strength is not behind you, it's within you. Let's walk forward together. Decode relationships, transform connections. Welcome to Beyond Boundaries. What if I told you that Easter isn't just a date on the calendar, but a divine invitation to rise, to renew, and to reclaim the life and love you deserve? Today we're diving deep into a truth that too many overlook. Easter symbolizes not just resurrection, but personal rebirth. A decision, a choice, right here, right now, to begin again with grace, strength, and unshakable feminine energy. So if you've ever felt stuck, heartbroken, or just tired of carrying the weight of what could have been, stay with me. Today might just be the day your whole life shifts. There's a profound misconception that life's renewal is something external, something that happens to you when conditions are finally right, when enough time has passed, or when someone else gives you permission to heal. But that isn't true. Not even close. Real resurrection, the kind that matters, is an internal phenomenon. It's a decision of the soul. It's the moment when you realize, perhaps after a season of suffering or humiliation or profound loss, that you are not merely the sum of your past defeats. You are not trapped by your former self unless you choose to be. This is no small realization. It's terrifying, actually, because it implies responsibility. If you are not permanently broken, if your soul is capable of standing up again, of choosing renewal, then it is no longer your pain that imprisons you. It's your refusal to move forward. There is something almost sacred and terrible about that kind of freedom, because once you see it, you can never again hide behind your excuses. Life will hand you betrayals. That's guaranteed. You'll experience losses that feel so unjust, so overwhelming, that they seem like personal affronts to the very idea of order and meaning. And when you are at your lowest, when the people you counted on have abandoned you, when the love you gave so freely has been squandered, you will face a choice. Will you stay buried under the rubble of resentment, bitterness, despair? Or will you stand, trembling but determined, and rebuild yourself from the ruins? The essence of Easter, if you strip away the religious imagery for a moment, is this. It is the insistence that life can emerge from death, that meaning can emerge from suffering, that dignity can emerge even from degradation, and that power, that rebirth, does not come from the outside. It's forged in the silent, invisible recesses of your heart. It's the decision to bear your cross, to walk through your private hell with your head held as high as you can manage, and to claim the dignity of someone who refuses to be defeated by tragedy. And make no mistake, that kind of rebirth costs something. It costs you your old identity. It costs you the pleasure of blaming others for your pain. It costs you the comfort of staying small, of staying bitter, of staying broken. And yet, what you gain in return is beyond price. You gain yourself. The second thing you must understand is that the feminine spirit, the energy that animates growth, nurtures beauty, and brings life into this battered world, is not passive. It is not merely receptive or soft. That's a grotesque misunderstanding. True feminine energy is creative power in its rawest form. It is the force that brings order out of chaos. It is the wellspring that revitalizes dead soil, that heals broken families, that inspires civilization to reach beyond their self-destruction toward something higher. You must not mistake gentleness for weakness. A woman connected to her true feminine energy is not fragile. She is a fountain of resilience. She does not demand permission to exist. She embodies existence itself, offering life, compassion, and fierce loyalty where it is deserved, and withdrawing it where it is not. That is creation and judgment woven together. That is strength tempered by wisdom, and it must be chosen. You cannot reconnect with that source of energy by accident. You have to turn away from cynicism. You have to turn away from the insidious whisper that says life is meaningless, that nothing matters, that your efforts are futile. That voice, that black, hollow voice, it seeks to kill not your body, but your spirit. And when you listen to it, even for a moment, it drains you of your creative power. To embrace your true feminine energy is to stand defiantly against that voice. It is to insist that beauty matters, that tenderness matters, that the nurturing of hope matters, even especially when the world seems hell-bent on crushing it. It is to create meaning out of suffering by choosing to love again, to believe again, to build again, even when your hands are still shaking from the last collapse. Creation is risky. Every act of creation implies vulnerability. It says, here is something I built, something I birthed, something I cherish. And then it exposes that thing to the chaos of the world. It could be rejected. It could be mocked. It could be destroyed. But still you create. Because to not create is to slowly die. The refusal to bring forth new life, whether that's literal life or emotional life or spiritual life, is a betrayal of your own essence. It is a retreat into sterility, into stagnation. And the price of that betrayal is despair. You were not made for that. You were made to create, to nurture, to renew. And every time you choose to do so, even in the smallest ways, you reaffirm your alignment with the fundamental structure of being itself. When you reconnect with that source, you will notice something extraordinary. Your life begins to reorganize itself around it. Relationships either rise to meet your new energy or they fall away, and that is a mercy. Opportunities present themselves, not because the world has suddenly become kinder, but because your perception has shifted. You see possibilities where once you only saw obstacles. You radiate a quiet strength that draws in people, situations, and paths that resonate with your true nature. You become a beacon, not because you demand attention, but because you embody authenticity in a world starved for it. And all of it begins with a simple, terrifying, magnificent decision to begin again. Healing is not the clean, linear journey we wish it to be. It is not a tidy sequence of victories where every day feels better than the last. No. Healing is chaotic, frustrating, often humiliating. It is 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and sometimes, on the darkest nights, it feels like all the steps have led you right back to where you began. But that feeling is a lie. You are not where you started. Even when it feels like you're drowning in the same grief, in the same regret, you are not the same person. Growth is happening, but it is happening in layers, slow, subterranean, invisible to the impatient eye. Healing moves like seasons, not machines. There are winters of sorrow where everything inside you feels dead and frozen, where the only task is to survive. There are springs of tentative hope where you glimpse the faint possibility of renewal. And sometimes when you least expect it, a storm will come out of nowhere, uprooting the fragile things you thought you had secured. That does not mean you are failing. It means you are alive. The modern world teaches you to despise slow healing. It tells you to move on, to get over it, to bounce back, like some manufactured thing without a soul. That you are not a machine. You are a living, breathing being made of stories, memories, longings, and wounds. Your heart is not designed to snap shut after it's been broken. It's meant to break open, to deepen, to stretch its capacity for love, not to retreat into cynicism. To heal deeply is to integrate your pain, not erase it. It is to weave your sorrows into your identity without letting them define your day. It is to carry the memory of betrayal, of grief, of shattered dreams, and yet choose to walk upright, to love again, to trust that something good can still be built from the broken pieces. There is no shame in hurting longer than you thought you would. There is no weakness in mourning what you lost. The shame, if it exists anywhere, is in giving up the journey halfway through, because it's harder than you imagine. And this process of healing, this real, agonizing, magnificent process, will reveal things to you that comfort never could. It will strip away illusions about who you thought you were, about what you thought you needed, about what you thought love should look like. It will teach you to stand alone, to find meaning not in what others give you, but in what you become in response to your suffering. That kind of self-acknowledge is worth every tear, every setback, every long, sleepless night of doubt, because it forges a version of you that is not merely healed, but wise. And wisdom is far more valuable than any fleeting happiness. Alongside this truth is another, equally brutal and liberating. Your worth is not and never was measured by your past relationships. Yet many, especially those who have given deeply of themselves, find this almost impossible to believe. When a relationship crumbles, especially one into which you poured your soul, it is easy to conclude that the failure reflects something lacking in you, that you were not enough, not lovable enough, not valuable enough to be fought for, stayed for, cherished, But that conclusion is a lie born of hurt pride and wounded innocence. Relationships end for 1,000 reasons, many of which have little to do with your inherent worthiness. Some people cannot recognize treasure even when it is handed to them. Some people are too broken to hold the love they claim to want. Some are simply not capable, not because you failed, but because they could not rise to meet you. Measuring your value by another's inability to love you properly is like measuring the quality of a sunrise by the blindness of the observer. The sunrise remains magnificent whether it is seen or not. So do you. It is crucial, existentially crucial, that you disentangle your self-worth from the reactions of others. Because if you don't, you will hand over your power to the most unstable forces imaginable, the moods, insecurities, and failures of other human beings. And you will live and die on the shifting tides of their approval. You must decide with clarity and ferocity that your worth is non-negotiable, that it exists independent of who stays, who leaves, who applauds, who condemns. Your dignity is not a bargaining chip. It is your birthright, but you must claim it. No one will hand it to you, least of all those who benefit from you forgetting you possess it. And once you understand this, once you see clearly that the end of a relationship says far more about its participants, compatibility, maturity, and timing than it does about your fundamental value, you are free. Free to grieve without self-condemnation. Free to remember the good without idealizing the past. Free to hope again without dragging the chains of old unworthiness into your future. You are not your heartbreaks. You are not your rejections. You are not the sum of other people's failure to see you. You are, and always have been, something deeper, something more enduring, and it is time to remember that. Forgiving yourself is the cornerstone of any true beginning. Without it, you're shackled, permanently bound to a version of yourself that cannot grow, cannot evolve, cannot be redeemed. And here's the brutal truth: the unwillingness to forgive yourself is not an act of virtue. It is not a noble form of self-punishment. It is pride in disguise, the arrogant belief that your mistakes place you beyond the reach of mercy. You will fail. You will betray your own values. You will hurt people you love. You will fall short of the person you intended to be. These are unavoidable facts of existence. The ideal you hold in your mind, that shining vision of who you could be, it demands everything from you, and you will inevitably fall short of it again and again. But to refuse yourself forgiveness is to say that you alone, out of all the broken and striving human beings who ever lived, are uniquely unworthy of grace. And that is a lie. Forgiveness does not mean you dismiss the harm you've caused. It means you fully acknowledge it without denial, without excuse, and then choose not to let it define your future. It means standing before the ruins of your worst moments and saying, I did this. It was wrong, but it is not all I am, and it will not be all I become. Without that act of inner mercy, you are doomed to carry your failures like an iron shroud around your soul. They will sap your energy, your hope, your ability to love and be loved. They will whisper in your ear every time you dare to reach for something better. Who are you to try? Don't you remember what you did? And unless you have laid those failures to rest, unless you have buried them in the graveyard of forgiven things, you will believe that voice. Self-forgiveness is not a feeling. It is a disciplined act of will. It is choosing, sometimes daily, to treat yourself as you would a beloved friend who made a terrible mistake, with sorrow, yes, but also with compassion, with understanding, and most importantly, with the unwavering expectation that they can do better. When you forgive yourself, you reclaim the energy that was trapped in shame. You free yourself to build something meaningful from the wreckage of your past. You allow yourself to re-enter life not as a ghost of your failures, but as a living soul with something real to offer the world. And part of that re-entry, part of the architecture of a renewed life, is the establishment of boundaries. Healthy boundaries are not luxuries, they are necessities. They are the invisible walls that protect the fragile, growing thing inside you, the new life you are trying to cultivate. Without them, everything you are rebuilding will be trampled by the careless, the entitled, and the predatory. There is an idea floating through culture that goodness requires endless openness, that being a kind, loving, feminine soul means letting anyone and everyone walk into your heart, your mind, your life without question or consequence. That idea is poison. To love well is to love wisely. It is to recognize that not every person is safe. Not every opportunity is worthy. Not every demand placed on you is legitimate. Boundaries are not signs of selfishness. They are acts of sacred stewardship. They are the acknowledgement that your time, your energy, your emotional resources are finite and therefore must be allocated with discernment. Every no you say to what diminishes you is a yes to what can nourish you. Every act of setting a boundary is an act of self-respect. A public declaration that you are a person, not a commodity. A being with dignity, not an endless well to be drained at others' convenience. And yet setting boundaries will cost you. Some people will resent them. Some will accuse you of changing, of becoming hard, of being selfish. Understand this clearly. Those who are wounded by your boundaries were benefiting from your lack of them. Their outrage is not evidence of your cruelty. It is evidence of their entitlement. You will need courage to withstand that backlash. You will need clarity of purpose to distinguish between healthy guilt, the guilt that comes from genuine wrongdoing, and toxic guilt, the false guilt you feel simply for daring to honor your own worth. Boundaries are not walls that keep love out. They are gates that control what is allowed in. Without them, you will either drown in the needs of others or build up bitterness so thick that no real connection is possible. A woman who sets firm, wise boundaries is not hard. She is wise. She is compassionate enough to love, but discerning enough to protect herself. She knows that her energy is needed for higher things than endless conflict, chronic exhaustion, and the maintenance of unhealthy dynamics. She knows that her sacred task is to nurture life in herself first and then in others, and that this nurturing requires space, safety, and self-respect. When you begin to establish boundaries, you send a clear message, not just to others, but to yourself. I matter, my time matters, my heart matters. And that message, repeated in word and deed, transforms you from within. It strengthens you, it roots you. It makes you capable of the great and terrible task of living fully, even in a world that so often demands you shrink, silence, and surrender your soul. Gratitude is not a naive denial of suffering. It is not the shallow insistence that everything is fine when everything is burning to the ground. Real gratitude is forged in the fire of adversity. It is the defiant act of finding something worth cherishing, even when pain is all around you. It is the determined refusal to let bitterness rot your heart. There is something profoundly transformative about the person who can stand, bloodied and bowed, and still find reason to say, there is still something good here. It does not erase the suffering. It does not make betrayal less cruel or loss less devastating, but it shifts your soul's posture from despair to defiance, the kind of defiance that does not destroy, but rebuilds. When you practice gratitude deliberately, when you look hard and painfully for the tiny fragments of light in the middle of darkness, you are training your mind to perceive opportunities where others see only obstacles. You are choosing to be aligned with life, not with death. Because resentment and bitterness, seductive as they are, ultimately side with death. They paralyze, they corrode, they convince you that hope is foolish and love is pointless. Gratitude, by contrast, sides with life. It says, despite the betrayals, despite the losses, despite the disappointments, there is something here worth fighting for. This shift is not automatic. It is a disciplined practice. It is work. And the earlier pain has gripped your heart, the harder that work will be. But the reward is immense. Because when you choose gratitude, you are no longer purely at the mercy of circumstances. You cease being a leaf tossed by the storm. You become the kind of soul who plants seeds even in a wasteland, who builds shelter even in ruins, who refuses to give up on the possibility of beauty even in the aftermath of destruction. And this act of gratitude, this stubborn allegiance to life, opens your eyes to truths that despair keeps hidden. You begin to see that even your own scars, the very places where you thought you had been irreparably wounded, can become the sources of your greatest strength, your deepest compassion, your most profound wisdom. But seeing this requires another layer of bravery. You must confront the hidden contracts you have made with the past. Many live unconsciously, chained to the belief that suffering makes them righteous, that staying wounded preserves the memory of what they lost. They fear that to heal would somehow betray the magnitude of their pain. They fear that letting go would diminish the injustice they endured. Yet clinging to pain does not honor the past. It imprisons you in it. Gratitude does not ask you to lie about what happened. It asks you to refuse to be wholly defined by it. It asks you to become more than the sum of your scars. And once you have taken even the first steps in that direction, you are ready to face one of the most painful but essential truths of all. Not everyone can walk with you into your new life. Some people belong to your history, not to your destiny. This is a savage realization, one that can tear at the soul with a grief so fierce it feels like betrayal twice over. But it is not betrayal. It is the recognition that growth always carries a cost, and often that cost is separation. When you rise, when you heal, when you set boundaries, when you start choosing gratitude over bitterness, hope over despair, you will threaten the comfort of those who have accommodated themselves to your brokenness. They may have loved you when you were wounded, dependent, silent. They may not know how or even want to love the version of you that demands respect, that stands tall, that shines. And you must let them go. You must understand that loyalty to others is never a justification for betrayal of yourself. You are not obligated to stay small so that others feel large. You are not obligated to remain wounded so that others are spared the discomfort of their own shortcomings. Your life is not a sacrifice demanded by the insecurities of those around you. Releasing people is an act of painful mercy for them and for you. It acknowledges that their chapter in your story has ended, that their role is complete, that clinging to them would only distort the beauty of what once was. It is not hatred. It is not revenge. It is simply the mature acceptance that different seasons require different companion. And the grief of this release is real. You will mourn the connections that cannot survive your transformation. You will ache for the familiarity, for the shared memories, for the ease that once existed. But mourning is not a summons to go back. Mourning is part of the price of forward motion. In letting go, you create space, sacred space, for the new, for the friendships, the love, the opportunities that can meet you where you are now, not where you once were. You make room for the life that your healing is calling you toward. You free yourself to rise without apology, without chains, without the unbearable weight of carrying those who have chosen not to rise with you. There's a brutal reality that few people are willing to confront. The past does not need your permission to haunt you. It will come unbidden, triggered by a familiar smell, a song, a look in a stranger's eye. It will remind you of failures you thought you had buried, of betrayals you thought you had outgrown, of dreams you thought you had forgotten. And if you are not prepared, if you have not built a strategy, a fortress within those moments will overwhelm you. The past is not merely a collection of memories. It is a force. It shapes your expectations, colors your perceptions, influences the very architecture of your nervous system. Every time you were hurt and didn't process it, every time you lied to yourself to survive, every time you abandon your own soul for the approval of others, all of it is still inside you, quietly organizing your life around the preservation of old wounds. Facing the past requires more than remembrance. It demands that you excavate the broken foundations you built your identity upon. It demands that you sit in the unbearable truths you've hidden from yourself, that you loved someone who could not love you back, that you sacrificed yourself for approval you were never going to receive, that you betrayed your own potential for the comfort of mediocrity. These are devastating realizations, and they must be faced anyway, because if you do not, you will live the same year 1,000 times and call it a life. You will find yourself locked in endless repetitions, attracting the same kinds of pain, entering the same broken dynamics, pursuing the same hollow goals, because your soul is trying desperately to get your attention. Until you confront what is unresolved, it will keep resurfacing, louder and more painful each time. There is no moving forward without going backward first. There is no resurrection without death. To begin again, truly begin again, you must be willing to descend into the underworld of your own psyche, to battle the monsters you created to survive a world that hurt you. You must become the hero of your own story, not by slaying dragons outside, but by confronting the dragons within. And once you have faced the past, once you have stared into its cold, indifferent eyes and refused to turn away, you must ask yourself the next question: what future am I now willing to create? Because the past will not stay dead just because you want it to. It will die only when it is replaced by something better, something stronger, something so alive that the shadows of what was can no longer sustain themselves in its light. But here lies another danger. Many, in the aftermath of pain, seek to rebuild their lives by constructing fragile, superficial structures. They decorate the surface of their existence without reinforcing the foundation. They seek validation from new relationships, distraction through constant activity, endless consumption of empty pleasures, anything to avoid the deep, terrifying work of actually building a life that means something. A life built on flimsy foundations will not withstand the inevitable storms. The next betrayal, the next loss, the next failure, it will come as sure as night follows day. And if you have not built yourself from the bedrock of meaning, purpose, and sacrifice, you will fall harder than before. You must build differently this time. You must begin with the question, what values will I honor with my life? Not what will make me feel good, not what will earn me applause. What values will I embody so completely that even when everything around me collapses, I will still be standing? To build a meaningful life is to commit to principles that are stronger than your moods. It is to live in alignment with truth, even when lies are easier. It is to act with courage, even when fear is suffocating. It is to pursue what is right, even when it costs you comfort, approval, and short-term happiness. Meaning does not happen by accident. It is not handed to you. It is wrestled from the chaos of existence by the sweat of your soul. It is carved into being through the disciplined refusal to surrender to nihilism, to cynicism, to the siren songs of despair and distraction. You build meaning when you show up for your own life fully, painfully, gloriously present. You build it when you take responsibility for your wounds without allowing them to become your identity. You build it when you dare to hope for better, not because you are naive, but because you are courageous enough to dream after the world has tried to break you. The life you long for, the one filled with depth, connection, beauty, and profound significance, is not found, it is built. And it is built with trembling hands, with aching hearts, with the kind of disciplined, defiant hope that refuses to surrender even when surrender would be easier. You are not here to merely survive the wreckage of your past. You are here to forge something magnificent out of it. Something so rich with wisdom, so saturated with love, so rooted in truth that the past, for all its gravity, can no longer pull you back. You must understand deeply that hope is not a passive thing. Hope is a discipline. It is a choice made in the heart of despair. It is a refusal to let the darkness have the final word. Most people believe that they need to feel hope before they can act with courage. But that's a lie. It's backwards. You act first in defiance of your fear, your exhaustion, your cynicism, and the hope follows. Hope is not a comforting emotion. It is a ferocious commitment to the idea that something better is possible. It's dangerous. It asks you to invest yourself in a future you cannot guarantee. It asks you to risk heartbreak, to risk loss, to stand vulnerable before life again, even when you know how brutal it can be. Hope demands a terrifying vulnerability, because to hope means you must admit that you care, that you are not yet ready to be numb, that your heart still beats for something greater than survival. Many people numb themselves precisely to avoid hope. If you hope, you might be disappointed. If you hope, you might be crushed. And so they choose the deadness of lowered expectations over the agony of potential failure. They believe they are protecting themselves, but in reality, they are slowly extinguishing their own souls. You cannot shield yourself from pain without also shielding yourself from joy. You cannot numb sorrow without also numbing wonder. If you wall yourself off from hope, you also wall yourself off from the extraordinary beauty that life, even broken life, still offers. And so hope is not a luxury. It is a necessity for any soul that intends to live fully. You must cultivate hope, not as a feeling, but as a habit. You must water it like a fragile plant in the middle of a desert, protecting it from the scorching winds of bitterness and despair. You must seek out beauty, seek out courage, Seek out moments of tenderness and goodness, even when your mind screams that it's all futile. Because it's those tiny sparks of hope, fanned carefully and deliberately, that eventually become the roaring fire you need to light your way through the darkness. And once that fire is burning, even if only as embers, you must use it. You must act. Transformation is not an abstract idea. It is a set of concrete, often painful, often frightening steps taken in the real world. Too many people wait for some internal magic, a wave of confidence, a surge of certainty before they move. They wait, and in the meantime, their dreams rot from neglect. You cannot wait for perfect condition. You cannot wait until you no longer feel afraid. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward while fear sits like a stone in your gut. Courage is recognizing that the fear will never fully leave you and moving anyway. Your life will not transform itself. No one is coming to rescue you. No one is coming with a plan, a map, a set of instructions perfectly tailored to your soul. You must stand up, trembling and uncertain, and begin the work anyway. You must choose the first act. However small, however seemingly insignificant, that pushes you in the direction of who you want to become. You make a decision. Today, I will not betray myself. Today, I will speak one truth that terrifies me. Today, I will say no to what diminishes me and yes to what calls me higher. Today, I will begin imperfectly, haltingly, but relentlessly. And the astounding thing, the miracle, if you will, is that reality begins to respond. The moment you act, the universe, in ways subtle and profound, rearranges itself around your commitment. Doors open that you could not have seen before. Strength emerges that you thought was gone forever. Allies appear. Possibilities unfold. Synchronicities happen, not because you sat waiting for a sign, but because you had the audacity to act as if the sign was already given. Action is the seed of transformation. Hope fuels it. Discipline sustains it. And the refusal to quit, to ever quit, is what ultimately brings the harvest. You will fail, you will stumble, you will sometimes move backwards. This